Hello everyone. In today's lecture of software engineering with UML, we are going to go through the second traditional model, which is a prototyping model. So the points which we are going to go through in today's lecture are: what is a prototype, why prototyping, working of prototyping model, some points to remember while building the prototype, and finally who should go for a prototype. So if you don't know the meaning of the word prototype, you can remember it as prototype is a sample. You can call it a sample or an example. Let us observe this picture in front of us. There is a picture of a robo. Both the robos are looking similar to each other, but the robo in red is having a different color. It might be having some difference in functionality as well, but in totality, if you say both the robos are same, only the thing is the color is different. One is in gray and the other is in red. We can also say that this the robo in the red might have some added functionalities as well. So basically, the robo on the left, the robo in gray color is a prototype robo, and the robo in the red color is a final robo. So we can see that the prototype is a sample, it is an example that how robo should look is something a prototype. What robo is exactly going to do and what robo is going to be sold out is the final robo. Let us see in detail how exactly this prototype is going to work. So the first thing which we should know is prototype is a first or preliminary version. The first thing you develop about a device, about a vehicle, or about a system is a prototype. The first thing which you develop, the first development is known as a prototype. Secondly, a prototype is an early sample, a model, or a release of a product built to test a concept or a process. So, we are going to build a prototype and we are going to test it. We are going to make some changes in it and then we will approach towards the final one. So, prototype is basically a model or a sample or a scratch model. So, remember, prototype is a sample. Why prototyping? See, say for example, we have not understood some requirements properly, and we have gone through two models earlier, which is system development lifecycle, and the other is waterfall model. Both were having some systematic phases of requirement analysis, but what if we don't understand the requirements? We were not allowed to roll back to our previous phase. We were given one single phase to understand requirements and start building. So if we don't understand the requirements initially, we will definitely build some wrong things and some unwanted things. So if you want to understand requirements properly, go for prototyping model. Prototyping model is built on currently known requirements or requirements which are not completely understood. If the user has given you some 20 requirements and you have understood some 7 or 8 requirements, start building your prototype with those 8 requirements and gradually approach your user and make the necessary changes. The next thing to remember is that this prototyping model specifically suits for complicated large projects. Large projects require large modules, n number of modules, n number of teams, and n number of cost and resources and basically time. So time consuming large projects, go for prototyping model. You can also go for prototyping where there comes a manual system where there is no existing computerized system to study. The person is first time approaching for computerized things. He has not got any idea. You can go for prototyping model. We went through system development life cycle which had 6 different phases. Every phase was specific, every phase was systematic, which had to be performed, and this was a circular development. We went through waterfall diagram which had many different phases, which is again systematic. Every phase is either validated or verified. Every phase was developing some sorts of documents which was getting passed on to next phases. So this was again a systematic model to follow, and one drawback in this model was you were not allowed to roll back to previous phase. And then comes our prototyping model. If you observe the diagram of prototyping model, basic and major, you are going to perform only four phases. The first phase is of requirement analysis, the second is design, third is coding, and the last one is testing. Here you cannot see, or I think you can say that maintenance and implementation is missing. You're just going to follow these four phases, and this block is labeled as a prototype. So this is your prototype, this is your sample, and after this sample is built, you're again going to perform design, code, and test, and then develop your final product. So here you can see that some clients are watching prototype of their future house. This is a prototype. If you see, this is a prototype. The clients are watching their future house, the house which is not yet developed or built. They are just having a look or feel of the small model, and this model is a replica of their actual house. Their actual house is going to resemble this model very, very closely. Let us see working of prototyping model. So if you see the diagram, we are going to perform initially requirement analysis, design, coding, and testing. After performing these phases, our prototype build is going to get completed. After this, there is going to be an interface with customer. We are going to have an interaction with the customer, and again we are going to perform design, code, and test. Say luckily or fortunately your prototype is exactly matching the expectations of the customer, you're going to build it exactly how the prototype is. You're going to serve it as the final model and build the actual one with respect to this prototype. But what if the customer is having some changes? The prototype is not as expected to what they wanted. They will give you some requirements, they will give you some changes, some modifications. Then you will have to go for design, code, and test. So the first thing you are going to do is perform requirement analysis and produce a preliminary SRS. We went through SRS in waterfall model. SRS was the most important document which was used throughout the development, and which is also going to be useful for customer after the development. But here, while building the prototype, we are discussing the build of prototype. We are going to generate one preliminary document. This is not the final document. And then we are going to produce a basic prototype by performing design, coding, and testing phase. The second thing which you're going to do is, after the prototype is built, the development is completed, and if you think now this prototype can be given to user to just use, the clients are allowed to use the prototype and play with it. Here you can see the client is using the prototype, and the developers are observing what their experience is going to be. They are going to observe, these are the developers, assume that these are the developers and these are the clients. So they are using your prototype, they are having a user experience. Now they will start giving you some feedback about maybe look and feel and maybe functionality. And what you have to do is you'll have to sit and observe what inputs they are giving, how they are reacting to the processing, how they are reacting to the output. The next thing which you will do is, the very next thing which you will do is you will get their feedback and then modify your prototype. While this experience, the clients got some ideas about some added functionalities, or they can also ask to remove some functionalities. So they will observe, and accordingly they will give you the feedback. After you get the feedback, you will again approach your client and ask them to use your prototype. We are still in the build and in the development and in the fixing of prototype. We have not started the build of actual project or actual software. So this cycle is going to get repeated. You'll get the feedback, you'll ask the user to use it again and then provide the next feedback. So this is a cycle. And till when is this cycle going to continue? Till the final prototypers and analyst accepts the model approved by the user. The user is going to approve your model that yes, this is the final product, this is what we expected, and this is perfect. At that time, this cycle is going to stop. Now the build for the final product is going to start. Remember the robos, the gray was the prototype and the red was our final product. Now we will start building this very software, or this very our final product build starts with the phase of design, code and test. Now we will generate a final SRS. This is the SRS which is going to be serving throughout the development and is going to be the final SRS. And then we will start developing or building our final product with respect to this final SRS. This was working of prototype. So it started with the customers, started with the build of prototype, customers or users experience, their feedback cycle, approval. Finally, the product build was started. We generated a final SRS and then the final software development started. So here are some points to remember. That the first point is keep the cost of developing the prototype to low. We should keep the cost to low. Why? Because this is just a sample. We are just using it to add some functionalities, remove some functionalities, and to understand what the customer's requirements are actually. The second thing, add only those features which are going to give you some valuable returns. Don't go on adding each and every single thing which is common and basic. Add those features which you didn't understood and focus on those requirements which were difficult to understand. Finally, one thing which you should remember is prototype is to be discarded. Discarded, that means it is thrown away, it is never implemented. Prototype is a sample, it is just a model, like the small house model which you were showing to your clients and how the actual house is going to be. So this is just a model which you're going to just showcase and just present, so you are going to throw it away. Next point to remember is we are going to generate very minimum number of documents during the build of prototype. Because prototype is going to be thrown away, we are not going to refer to those documents. We are going to refer to the final SRS we developed after the approval of clients. We are going to reduce the cost of testing. Testing is one phase which incurs the maximum amount of investment. It takes a lot of costing and investment of time as well. So we are going to reduce it because prototype is just a sample. The final product build has to be kept into mind and then it should be developed appropriately. This is going to increase complexity. As discussed earlier, this is going to suit for only complex and big projects. If there is a small project, don't go for prototype. This is definitely very slow and time consuming. Then who should go for a prototype? So the first case is if you haven't understood what customers' requirements are, if you are failing in analyzing those requirements, definitely go for prototyping. Say for example, somebody has come up with a big project and is failing to give you requirements, or you are failing to understand those requirements. You're not getting proper clarity. If you're going to go for wrong requirements, you're definitely going to build a wrong product. Instead, go for prototyping. The second case is if some people or client from non-IT background approach you for a software. Now it's 2020 and person with a non-IT background who is not at all familiar to what computers are is difficult to imagine and accept. So you can say that what if a person comes who is not familiar to what software is? So such people are first time going to have an experience of software, or someone who is having a manual system and now they are approaching or switching to computerized system. They can have a bit of confusion. For them, go for a prototype, build a prototype, give them to use it so that they understand which button to be pressed, how to traverse from forms to form, how to view records. So let them understand all these things and then build a right and the final product for them. And the third case can be if clients have a doubt on developers' capabilities. There can be a case that there is a newly formed company. There can be a case that there is a newly established team of people going to work for the first time. In such case, clients are definitely going to demand for some work to be showcased and they can ask for a prototype. So these are the three cases. The first case was requirements not properly understood. The second, person of non-IT background or someone who is not familiar to what software is. And the third case is if the client are having some doubts or questions on developers' capabilities. So this was all about our second traditional model, which is prototyping model. Very, very simple to understand, but very, very complicated in practical to work with. Thank you.